The primetime political panel was already buzzing with anticipation. The show had teased a major guest appearance all week, and when Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett was introduced as the surprise final panelist, the tension in the studio surged. Seated across from her was a mix of seasoned conservative commentators and none other than Barron, the youngest Trump, now a rising political commentator and social media figure in his own right. At just 19, he had amassed a massive following. Known for his slick delivery and sharp pay, often divisive takes, the discussion began politely enough, with surface-level questions about youth involvement in politics, digital activism, and party loyalty. Barron, clearly confident, leaned into the spotlight with his usual cool demeanor, throwing around buzzwords and statistics. He made a few smug remarks about liberal overreach and even took a subtle jab at Crockett's recent legislative battles. The audience chuckled, but Crockett didn't flinch. She leaned forward, eyes locked on Barron. Her voice was calm, measured, almost too calm. "You know," she said, flipping through a thin folder on the desk before her, "since we're talking about the next generation's role in shaping political discourse, maybe we should also talk about accountability." Barron blinked. The host's smile faded as he realized this was going off script. Crockett continued, "Because what's interesting, Barron, is that several anonymous accounts that have been spreading disinformation and racially charged memes were traced back to an IP address linked to your residence in Palm Beach." The studio went still. A technician fumbled with audio controls. One of the panelists raised her eyebrows. Barron's composure cracked, just slightly, a twitch of the mouth, a darting glance toward the camera. That's absurd," he stammered. "I have no idea what you're referring to." Crockett didn't break eye contact. She simply taped the folder once, slowly. "I think you do." Before anyone could cut to commercial, the audience began to murmur. The energy in the room had shifted completely, and Barron Trump, for the first time on national television, didn't have a clever comeback. The cameras were still rolling, and the studio lights felt hotter by the second. The host nervously shuffled his notes, clearly debating whether to intervene, but Jasmine Crockett pressed on. She opened the manila folder and pulled out a stack of documents, her fingers steady. "Since you say you have no idea," she said coolly, "let me help refresh your memory." Behind her, the producers switched the studio screen to a feed showing screenshots of blown up, time-stamped images from a private Discord server. The usernames were blurred, but metadata confirmed their origin. The chat logs featured vile jokes, digital plans to suppress voter turnout using targeted misinformation, and worst of all, multiple references that directly hinted at Barron's identity. The usernames matched his known gaming aliases, the tone matched his online voice, and several of the screen captures were taken during times Barron had been live on stream. Unmistakable proof of overlap. Barron's face drained of color. He tried to interrupt, waving a hand. "This is taken out of context. You don't even know if that's me." Crockett raised a brow and calmly flipped to the next page. "Actually, I do. The IP traces match. And here," she said, holding up a printed image, "is your own selfie from that Discord server. You sent it during a chat about fabricating news headlines. Ring any bells now?" The audience gasped audibly. One of the conservative panelists turned to Barron in disbelief, visibly uncomfortable. The host motioned again to cut to commercial, but Crockett didn't pause. She held up one last document, this time stamped with a Department of Justice watermark. "This isn't just about online behavior," she said. "This is now the subject of a federal inquiry. Coordinating digital disinformation campaigns, especially against protected groups, is a serious matter." Barron swallowed hard. His mouth opened, then closed again. His hands, once neatly folded on the desk, now gripped the edges tightly. The audience was silent, glued to every word, every shift in expression. Barron Trump, who had built his young public identity on smugness and superiority, now looked cornered at his carefully crafted image unraveling before millions of viewers. The pressure in the room became unbearable. Barron's breathing grew shallow, his face a pale mask of shock and confusion. The confident persona he had brought to the show, the smirks, the swagger had vanished completely. He looked around helplessly, his eyes scanning the faces of the panelists, the camera crew, and finally the audience, where phones were already raised. recording what was rapidly becoming a media firestorm. His mouth moved as if to speak, but no sound came out. A faint tremble rippled through his fingers as he reached for his water glass and missed, knocking it over. Water spilled across the desk, some of it soaking the stack of damning papers Crockett had placed between them. The host leaned forward, clearly alarmed now, murmuring, "We can pause here if we need to." Barron shook his head weakly, trying to gather himself. "Yeah, I'm fine," he whispered, barely audible. But he wasn't. His hands twitched again, then stiffened. His eyes widened unnaturally. Crockett, for the first time since she began her takedown, looked genuinely concerned. "Somebody call medics," she said quickly, standing up from her seat. Then, as if in slow motion, Barron tried to stand but his legs buckled beneath him. He collapsed sideways off the chair, hitting the studio floor with a dull thud that echoed over every microphone in the room. Panic broke out. Producers rushed in from off-camera, yelling for the feed to be cut. The screen briefly went black. Studio staff scrambled to clear the area as paramedics stormed in moments later, carrying equipment and a stretcher. One of them quickly checked his pulse while another placed an oxygen mask over his face. Back in the control room, the broadcast switched to a pre-recorded segment on climate policy, but it was far too late. Millions had already witnessed the fall. Social media erupted instantly. Hashtags like #BarronCollapse, #CrockettTruthBomb, and #LiveItMeltdown began trending worldwide within minutes. Some thought it was a stunt, others speculated it was a panic attack or worse. But the footage, raw, uncut, and looped endlessly online, told the story without a word of commentary. Barron Trump had collapsed under the weight of his own secrets, exposed in real time, on live television. Outside the network's headquarters, flashing lights from news vans and swarming reporters created a chaotic scene. Crowds had already gathered along the barricades, chanting, filming, and demanding answers. Hours had passed since the live broadcast was abruptly cut, and the nation was still buzzing from what they had just witnessed. Jasmine Crockett emerged from the building flanked by two staffers, her face composed but visibly drained. Microphones were immediately thrust toward her. "Congresswoman Crockett, did you intend for this to happen? What was your reaction when he collapsed? Do you feel responsible?" Reporters yelled over one another, their voices a blur of urgency. She stepped up to the podium that had hastily been set up outside and raised her hand for silence. The crowd quieted as camera lights flicked on. Her voice was steady. "What happened today was not something I take lightly," she began. "No one, and no matter how powerful, how privileged, or how well-connected they should be, shielded from the truth. But I also did not come here to harm anyone. I came here to hold someone accountable." She paused, allowing her words to settle. "I sincerely hope Barron Trump makes a full recovery. I don't wish illness or collapse on anyone. But let's be honest with ourselves, what we uncovered today was not fiction. The documents are real, the investigations are real, and the consequences must be real too." Inside the hospital just a few blocks away, Barron Trump lay sedated, surrounded by Secret Service and a small medical team. The Trump family had issued a brief statement calling the event a politically motivated ambush, accusing Crockett of exploiting his agent inexperience. But behind the scenes, attorneys were already mobilizing, and cybersecurity experts had been dispatched to investigate the legitimacy of the leaks. Still, the damage was done. The once rising political figure was now at the center of a federal investigation. Congress was abuzz with demands for hearings. His sponsors and podcast partners began pulling support. Even conservative commentators who had previously backed him were now distancing themselves, unsure how deep the scandal ran. Back on the street, Jasmine turned from the podium and walked away without taking any more questions. Behind her, screens across the city replayed the footage on a loop: Barron Trump collapsing, Crockett standing firm, and an entire nation watching as the illusion of invincibility shattered in real time.